Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the Dad Edge podcast. I'm Larry Hagner. I am your host and founder. If you've been here for any amount of time, you already know this. Been podcasting now for nearly, oh my God, 6.5 years, almost 7. And basically, if you're new to this show, this is the Dad Edge podcast where we are interviewing imperfect fathers at every level. And your host, yours truly, is definitely in the front of the line of that one. We make mistakes every single day, but we help men learn and we help men pivot and we give men tools and skills to make their life more fulfilling and to live legendary. And then not only that, but also to cultivate legendary relationships under your own roof. So today, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things, and I've got a great interview for you guys today. Actually, the gentleman that's on today is someone who's on the Dad Edge Alliance leadership team. He's been doing life with us for quite some time. We're going to be talking about many different things, but most important, we're going to be talking about community today. We're going to be talking about how we can handle the adversity and the unexpected curveballs that come our way as fathers. And most importantly, what I'm really excited to talk to this gentleman about is interrupting the drift. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what the drift is, before I introduce Shane today, the drift is the wash, rinse, repeat cycle. Get up, have our coffee, go to work, do our thing, answer emails, check social media, get pissed off at what's going on in the world. I'm kidding. I just kind of threw that one in there. But come home and everything is fine, good, and busy in our lives. And all the while, what we really want is to step in to the greatest relationships under our own roof. And the problem and the misses that I've seen over the past several years doing this work is that we are highly trained in our careers. In fact, if you really look at it, most of us have a 4-year degree in something, or at least a 2-year degree in something. But when it comes to marriage, most of us will put more planning into the day of the wedding versus creating a vision for what a successful marriage will look like. We do the same thing in parenting, but here's where I let men off the hook. Here's where we let ourselves off the hook a bit. There really hasn't been up until now any training ground to be a fulfilled father, to have more patience, more emotional resilience with your kids, most importantly, more patience with ourselves. Sometimes the biggest bully and the loudest voice that's tearing us down is the one between our 2 ears. And we're also not taught how to create an extraordinary marriage. That's a really tough one too. And in fact, if you ask most men, they grew up with an example of perhaps not the best example. So what is the hungry, curious man who is a father and a husband now supposed to do? And that is get curious and learn and interrupt the drift. The drift is where we step out of that wash, rinse, repeat cycle, and we step into learning skills to connect with our wife, learning skills to connect with our kids, to become a better leader within our businesses or places of work, to optimize our physical, mental, and emotional health so we can selflessly serve on a more profound level. And most of us, unfortunately, will take our best visions and best intentions to our deathbed and never fully live them. That's why I'm really happy to be talking to Shane Achey, who is a part of our Dad Edge Alliance leadership team and has been for quite some time. I'm gonna let him introduce himself. What's up, Shane?
Hi, Larry. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so thankful to be a part of the Alliance, and just to be on leadership team has been a real blessing. I just want to honor you for a second too. Just this community that you've built for me and for all these men. It's just such an amazing thing to be able to get the tools that we need to help our marriages, as parents, as dads. It's truly been amazing for me. And, even more than that, I think the community that we have here of fathers, the relationship that we have with each other, for me, it's just doing life with these guys every day. It's just something that I really treasure and hold close to my heart. So I want to thank you for that, for putting all the work and effort into that, because it's meant a lot to me, and I know it has to a lot of other guys also.
Man, number one, I didn't expect that, But obviously, thank you for saying that, man. And we truly value you as well. You have become just a powerhouse for men in our community, holding them accountable. Actually, speaking of holding accountable, you are what we call our DEA team commander on one of our Tuesday evening call teams. Just share with the audience, what does the Dad Edge Alliance team commander do?
So as a commander, our role sort of has morphed from, I would say, simply accountability to more of building relationships and getting people connected. We have call teams. It's very important. But I think where the real growth happens in our group is getting outside of those call teams and building relationships with other guys. That's where I've really seen it, and I've heard it from other guys, is getting to know each other in a real intimate personal basis, and just being able to see that and see guys be able to do that. It's been awesome to help facilitate that, and the accountability part is also important, and it really comes, I believe, through that relationship. Guys knowing each other and feeling that they can trust each other and bring that sort of stuff up. So that's sort of how I see the role.
That is the role. It is really accountability and connection is the role of the DEA commander. And we also dare men in the call teams to embrace a challenge of the week and to hold them accountable, and then to connect them to somebody else who wants to hold them accountable and make sure that they execute. So, hey, before we get into today's topic and getting further, I want to make sure the men have some context of what your family looks like. So what's going on in the Achey family?
The Achey family right now is a little crazy. We have twin boys. They are 3, going to be 4 here in a couple days. My daughter is 2. She'll be 3 in October. And my wife is also currently pregnant, and she's due in December. So we will have, I got to get this right, we will have 4 that are 4 and under come December. Yeah, so we're sort of just embracing the crazy over here.
Just as you say that, like, what are some things that come up for you?
I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, just, I can sort of use it as an excuse. It's easy to be like, well, we're busy. We have all these toddlers, and we're exhausted, which is true. I mean, come the end of the day, I'm exhausted, but I love my kids, and just the playtime with them that I get to have coming home, and just embracing them. And my boys are wild and crazy, and they love to wrestle, and they come up with all sorts of crazy games. The other day we were playing cheetah and antelope out in the yard and running around, and I'm trying to be in that place and not go to the place of this is just going to be crazy and there's all these obstacles and things that is going to make life difficult. I want to sort of be excited to go on that adventure and figure out ways to put 4 little kids in a car and go places that we need to go, and keep giving them those adventures that they want and they need. That's sort of where my mind is with it right now. It changes from day to day, but that's really where I'm living in this moment.
It seems like you guys have had your kids right around the same time. So is there something big that happens at the beginning of the year? Is there an anniversary or a birthday that we should know about?
No, so our what really happened with there's a story behind all of this. My wife and I had our twins. We were basically told that we were not going to be able to have kids naturally. So we sort of went through a journey, and we ended up going to a fertility specialist, and that was what he told us. So we went through the process of in vitro fertilization, and had some struggles with that, but we did end up having our twins. And then we sort of figured we're done. We're blessed. We're in a good situation. We actually had almost lost them. My wife was at 22 or 23 weeks.
Wow.
And we got some really scary news that she had to be rushed to labor and delivery, and they thought that she might have to deliver our twins at 22 weeks. And, the chances of survival at that point are very minimal. But we made it through that. She came to full term with them. They were big, still are big. So then, we thought we were done. And we found out 4 months later that my wife was pregnant with our daughter. And then they're 13 months apart. And then we just found out this year that my wife is also pregnant with the fourth. So it just sort of ended up lining up that way. So it's just going to be a very busy fall for us with birthdays in September, October, and December.
It's funny. You and I don't know how much of this the audience really knows. You and I, our stories are pretty aligned, meaning that we were told the exact same thing, 15 years ago when it came to, we had some issues as well. My wife has an endometriosis real bad. So we were basically told like, hey, we tried for 3 years to have our first, couldn't get pregnant. We were even told that like, hey, you're probably going to have to come back here after we did get pregnant, after doing in vitro, that we'd have to come back and do it again. And turns out we didn't. And kind of the same thing happened. We had a bit of a surprise, pretty much on my oldest 1 year birthday. We found out we were pregnant with our second. We're like, wow, we didn't think we could even have any on our own. And then we weren't really careful. And then we had our third, and then we had our fourth. So, the cool thing though about having four and under, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the cool thing about that, even though it is going to be busy, right? But 4 kids, it doesn't matter how spread out they are, it's busy. And, you're having 4 back to back, which I wouldn't say it's a regret, but if I had it to do over again, I would have done them closer together. Because one thing that we noticed, especially when we had our third, because the second and the third were 6 years apart, it literally felt like we were parenting 2 different worlds. So we had a newborn that was in diapers, and then we had kids that were in Little League. And it was like, we felt like we had an only child and 2 boys. Like literally that's what the worlds felt like. And the 2 older ones really wanted nothing to do with the younger one. Life actually got easier when we had our fourth, believe it or not. A lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I have 3. I couldn't imagine 4. I actually couldn't imagine 3 even now. Like my 2, we have the littles and the bigs. So the littles get along great. The bigs get along great. They each have each other. And of course they fight and all that good stuff too. But it had it to do over again, I think I would have just done it in one fell swoop versus spread it out as much as we did. So, yeah.
I think, my wife and I talk about that, and it's just like you said, it's going to be exhausting. There's going to be a lot of work here for a number of years, but we're really excited about the future with them all being really close. My boys and my daughter right now they're with each other all the time. My boys actually just went to preschool for the first time yesterday. And my daughter is sort of like, what is that? I'm not used to not being with my brothers. So yeah, I think we're really excited about that. They'll all be very close. I grew up a little bit that way too, where it was more spaced out. I have an older brother, a younger brother, and then my sister and I are pretty close. And then my older brother is 5 years older than me. My younger brother is 5 years younger than me. So I understand what it's like to have, that real big gap in between there and the difficulties with that. So yeah, I think we would agree that we're happy that they are that way.
Yeah. I mean, either way you go, 4 is going to be busy. So, but it's cool. You got a cool family, man. I know one of the things we wanted to talk about, which is right in line with some of what we're talking about right now. You and I were discussing what it is that meant so much to you to come on here and share. And one of them was embracing the unexpected in life. And before I get your opinion on that or how you go about that, because to be honest, I don't know exactly what you're going to say about that, but I know you're going to share some experiences. There are 6 basic human needs, and certainty is actually one of them, right? Certainty is actually one of the 6 basic human needs. And the unexpected things that come up, usually we don't call them unexpected things. We call them problems, or we call them obstacles, or we call them adversity. But being able to embrace those things, because there was no promise of an easy life. But to be honest, as fathers, that makes us very unsettled sometimes. And even as I look into the world right now, as you and I record this podcast, I never talk anything politically on this podcast, but I think I'm going to say one thing because it's unsettling. And I think it's right in line with embracing things that we weren't expecting. Last night, as we record this, even though we're launching it in October, Joe Biden addressed the nation on new mandates, for companies larger than 100 employees will have to get vaccinated and all that. And whether you believe in the vaccine or not, I'm not here to discuss that. But I think what that message really conveyed is there's a lot of certainty that, okay, now a lot of people are going to have to go get vaccinated if they want life to stay the same. It also left a lot of unsettled uncertainty, and even, I would say, rage in some people because they feel like they're having their freedoms taken away. And that's what I would definitely call embracing things that are unexpected, embracing things that are uncertain. And how do we that's obviously on a massive level, but just human beings in general, but fathers in particular. I know you want to talk about how we can go about embracing uncertainty and how you've done that.
Yeah, I think so. As I think about my story, it really starts when my wife and I got married, and we sort of joke around about this a little bit. It seems like every plan that we had made, every time we tried to make a plan, the opposite happened almost every time. And right from the beginning, I think I wasn't sure if I was going to share this or not, but I think, I did okay with my wife, so I'll go ahead and do that. Even from the very beginning of our wedding night, that did not go the way that we wanted. And we ended up finding out that, there had to be a surgery there for my wife before we were able to be intimate with each other. And that took, I think it was like 6 months till that was able to happen. So that right from the beginning was something that sort of threw us for a loop.
So
And then
just real quick for clarity. So basically you guys couldn't be intimate until 6 months into your marriage?
right. We were not able to have sex until we got married in June, and it was Thanksgiving until we were able to do that.
Wow.
And honestly, so this is something where I do feel like there was a moment there on my wedding night where I sort of went into it. You talked a lot about expectations.
Yeah.
And I also, have, since learning about a lot of that, realized that expectations are not a good thing. And I went into my wedding night, as I think most men or husbands would, with expectations. And it didn't happen the way I wanted. And I started acting like a child, I think, for a little bit. And I remember laying there in the bed and thinking, this is not right. This is not fair. And I felt God basically speak to me and say, what is wrong with you? Your wife is over there. How is she feeling during this? And how are you supporting her? And what ended up being starting out to be a pretty awful night turned out to be an amazing morning. We look back on this with a lot of joy because it brought a lot of connection to us. And then throughout those 6 months, it gave me a lot of patience with my wife, where I think she felt worse about it than I did.
Sure.
So I look back on that with joy, actually, but it was certainly a curveball.
My God, man. And this is exactly what I'm saying. I think a lot of guys in the audience probably think that a lot of these podcasts are pre-planned, right? I think we have a direction and we have some structure and foundation. The stories, though, are completely and totally authentically organic. I did not expect you to say that, right? And let's speak to the human male brain, right? Both heads, right? I think any guy would be like, wow, this is not how I expected my wedding night to be. But it's amazing what happened. And for you, it sounds like it was like divine intervention, right? It was calling on maybe even a higher power than what you had, because sometimes when we stay in our own heads, we stay within that expectation loop, right? And we get more and more pissed and we get more and more upset that things didn't unfold the way we thought or expected to. But even the question of like, well, how am I supporting her right now? Because I think if the tables were turned, right? I mean, think about this for a second from a guy's point of view. If the tables were turned, and let's just say you couldn't perform on your wedding night and your wife got pissed at you on your wedding night versus taking it as an opportunity to be like, hey, this happens. Like, we've had a long day, right? I know you want to, like, mentally, but maybe just physically right now, it's like it might be a little difficult because there's been a lot of things that have happened today. And let's just connect in other ways versus like her getting pissed off and upset. And now you have that that like blueprint, that stamp on your mind and heart of how your wedding night went down. And no guy on the planet would sign up for like, oh my, yeah, my wife was so disappointed and pissed and I was humiliated. Instead, it was just like, yeah, this kind of happened, and but other really cool things came out of it. But it started with, I think that sounds like you were relying on a higher power than yours.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I'm a faith-based guy for sure, and I lean on God, in a lot of those situations, and my faith to sort of bring me through a lot of that stuff, and had to with a lot of this. If I'm moving forward, we talked a little bit about our kids and how the struggle that I had there. But there's even more than that. When we went to our specialist, my wife was really concerned that it was going to be her fault, that she was going to be the issue. And I think that held her off for a while. And there was some things there that he said, she could correct, and things that needed to be done. But really the issue was not with her, it was with me. And I had a hard time sitting with that. It took a lot of prayer and just reflection to be able to get through that. And again, something that my expectation was, we were going to go in there, he was going to say, okay, here's the problem, we'll fix it and you're good to go. And that was not the case. And despite that, we still sort of look back on it and think, man, how did my wife and I asked the question a lot, why us? Not in a bad way, but in a good way. Why did we get blessed with, these 3 kids, soon to be 4, and the situation that we're in? And I know a lot of people, in fact, we just heard a story the other day of somebody who, and I'm sure you do too, that have been through a similar process of in vitro fertilization or other things that they've tried. And this particular couple tried, 3 different times and all were unsuccessful. So that is constantly sort of in my head. Why did we get put in this situation? And I was praying a lot about that, I think, some time ago. And what I really heard was, which is why I think I'm being a little bit more vulnerable, and really why I wanted to jump on your podcast in the first place, is God telling me to tell my story and our story. And some of this stuff that's difficult to talk about is part of it. So I really wanted to be able to share that and put that out there, because I'm sure there's other men that struggle with the same thing. These are not easy topics, but I think putting things out in the light and getting them out of the shadows makes it easier to talk about,
Yeah.
and helps other people to, inspire them to do the same thing.
Yeah. When it comes to problems that arise or adversity or obstacles that arise in somebody's marriage, you're either going to rise together, right? Or it's going to be the cracks in the foundation of the relationship are going to be revealed. One of 2 things will happen. But it sounds like for you guys, you really leveraged into each other for some strength and some guidance. But if you could give men some advice on some how-tos, right? Because we're probably talking to a lot of men out there who are listening to you right now. And, they're experiencing maybe some of those cracks in the foundation, and maybe some things are happening in their life. And they're like, man, at the end of the day, like, how can I just get aligned with her? Right? How can we start walking in the same direction together? I don't even know where to start. So for you to advise those men, what would you, based on your story and your experience, what would you advise those guys to do?
I think when this sort of stuff comes up, it's like you said, the unexpected comes up. It's better if you face it together instead of pulling apart from each other. and trying to, align with each other and sort of tackle those, those things as a couple. Um, I'm thinking back on a lot of the things that we've been through. I mean, it's not to say that going through this stuff was all okay. Well, we just gotta, work together and everything's gonna be fine. I mean, I had bad days. There was a lot of that we looked at each other and there was struggle, there was frustration, there was I would say, my wife, when we first heard some of that news, there was a lot of frustration there, and she shared some of that with me. But I think for both of us, what we would say, and we've talked about this, is that for us, love is a choice. It's something that every day we constantly choose to love each other, despite what, and I'll speak for myself, um, despite what my wife may feel, what reactions she has towards me, or, whatever's going on that day, I'm going to choose to love her. And she's asked me this question before. There's honestly not been one time in our marriage that you haven't loved me. And I could honestly say, no, I've never not loved you. There's times where I didn't like you. We've had arguments and things come up, and I'm sure you felt the same way about me, but no. And I hope that she can look back on that years from now and just say, hey, my husband wasn't a perfect guy. We made a lot of mistakes. We've been through a lot of stuff, and that was hard, but I know he loved me, and I didn't have to earn that. I didn't have to do anything. He just loved me. Just off the top of my head, that's sort of, I think, just you talk about security, just letting your wife know that you're there, and no matter what you're going through, you'll face it together, and you love her, no matter what happens, I love you, and we'll get through this together.
It's fascinating that you're sharing that, because a lot of people don't realize this, but the needs of your wife are to feel seen, heard, and safe. Seen, heard, and safe. And if you really think about this, and dude, me included, man, like sometimes making my wife feel seen and heard with 4 energetic, crazy boys, and then I'm running an organization as well. And it's super easy sometimes to take that for granted, right? That my wife needs to feel seen and heard and safe. But our 3 basic needs are to feel respected, appreciated, and validated. Like it or not, that's just one of our core. Those are our 3 core needs. And if we're doing a pretty decent job of meeting her with those 3 needs, that reciprocity is more likely to come back, for her meeting ours, right? But it's at the end of the day, you nailed it, because most of our wives, especially when adversity strikes, the one thing that she's asking, like deep in her soul, are we good here? We're okay, right? We're safe. Like he's not going anywhere, right? And we're still aligned, right? Like we're still connected, aren't we? Those are the questions that she's really asking herself. And if we can provide, like, yeah, I'm still here. We're good. We're still marching in the same direction. I still love you. That's going to help her feel way more at ease. You also talked about the drift. And I'm really curious because, again, these stories come authentically, and originally we don't pre-plan these, but I know you want to talk a little bit about the drift and your story around that.
Yeah. So this sort of starts with you brought it up a little bit earlier, and I'm not going to get into politics either. But before I joined the Alliance, that's sort of where I was. I was caught up in a bad way. I was not growing. I would say I was stuck in the drift. I mean, my marriage was good. I wouldn't say we had bad communication or, anything was bad, but we certainly weren't growing, and I didn't feel like it was great. And I wanted to do something different. So I shut all of that off. There were things that I was a part of that I was like, I'm done. I'm not listening to this anymore, and I'm done. So I ended up joining the Alliance and just diving right in. And I think thinking about my marriage specifically, like I said, we have our share of ups and downs and bad days and things like that. But for the most part, things were good. But for me, I think my love language is quality time. And what that looks like is face-to-face interaction, communication. I can sit there and just talk for a long time. It's just something I enjoy doing. And I was coming to interactions with my wife with an attitude and not really putting in the work. So my attitude was like, hey, this is my love language, it's quality time. It's not getting filled. Can we talk? And my wife, I'll just sort of, honor her here for a second. She's running around with 3 kids all day. My wife's a stay-at-home mom, and a really, really good one. Engages with them all day, lots of hard work, even before she was pregnant. Just lots of stuff she would do with them. And now on top of that, it just adds a whole nother layer of exhaustion and everything else that goes with that. So picture that. And then I'm coming home and I'm saying, hey, let's talk. And she just wants to sit there and relax. And I would say, she would look at me and go, okay, talk. And I would say, the little kid in me would come out and I would say, well, you talk to your girlfriends, or, you talk to your mom. Why can't you talk to me like that? And that would never end well. So what I learned was that if I would put in some work and start asking better questions, doing things like that, that has made a world of difference in our marriage. There's times where I'll just sit for 5 minutes and think about a question or something that I want to ask my wife, generative questions, just random things sometimes. And I'll think, okay, she'll be tired. This might get us 10 minutes. And there's times where we sit there and an hour and a half later, we're sitting there still talking, and she just keeps going, and she's just talking, and I love it. And I've learned things about my wife that I didn't know before. We're getting interrupted here a little bit.
This is called the Dad Edge podcast. So we welcome the background.
Yeah, there's plenty of background. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can.
Oh, I can. Yeah, it's all good.
Okay.
The only reason that my side of the mic here is quiet is because all 4 of my kids are in school, and I ran my dog for 2.5 miles. So otherwise, he'd be in here like under my arm. So.
So what you're telling me is I just got to run my kids for a couple of miles, and then we'd be good. All right.
Totally.
I will.
4 kids under 4. Do that. Yep.
I will take note of that. Yeah. So I sort of lost where I was, but I think to sum it up, it really, what got me out of that, the drift, was doing the work. When it comes to my marriage, was like, I have to put in the work. Marriage is not just going to be great on its own. I have to put some work into that. And, then we'll start to see things change. And that's one thing that I could suggest to build connection. And I know you're big on asking better questions, and I would just second that. It has made a world of difference in our marriage.
What's a generative question? I'm putting you on the spot, but I know what it is, but the audience hears that and they're like, what does that even mean? So give us an example.
So a generative question is something that I think you're looking more. I guess a lot of mine are even future generative questions, where I'm looking beyond just today and just coming home and saying, "Hey, how was your day?" It's more getting into what are things going to be like 5 years from now, or what's something that throughout the day, what's something that happened that you really enjoy, something that you have to think a little bit more about, that doesn't just give that one quick answer and the conversation's over. It sort of naturally leads the conversation into places that maybe you didn't even expect it to go. That's sort of how I'm not sure of the specific definition, but that's sort of how I look at it, is a question that takes you beyond just the normal day-to-day stuff that most people ask.
So we're talking about the drift, right? So I want to give the audience some context here on what a generative question is, so you guys can start using some of these, right? We've got a whole list of generative questions for one of my free resources, which is 21 Days to an Extraordinary Marriage. One of the emails in there, it's just an email series where it teaches you 3 different skill sets and gives you 3 challenges. And one of them is to take your wife out on a date, and I give you a list of 20 different generative questions. Generative questions, we're talking about the drift. A drift question is, how was your day? Good, fine, busy. Usually the answers we get, what's for dinner? How'd you sleep? What do we got going on this weekend? Those are like more top level managerial, non-generative questions. They don't really do a whole lot of connecting. Generative questions are to ask, what is the best of what was, what's the best of what is now, and what the best of what could be, right? And you're really digging into somebody's experiences if you're talking about their past or present, or you're talking about their vision. So like, for instance, a future-based, what Shane is talking about, future-based generative question is, think about our life in October of 2022, which is 12 months from now. And I want you to just think about us sitting outside on our deck, smiling, enjoying the weather. Maybe we're having a cup of coffee. And you look at me and you're like, man, it's been such an amazing year. And we have gotten to do so many things that I didn't think we would get to do. What are you telling me that we did that was so meaningful? So what you do in that moment, right, Shane? I mean, you put your wife in what's called a future generative visionary state, where you have now painted the picture where she's sitting with you, telling you what exactly has happened, which puts her in the position to dream and to think about what could be, which most of us are not in that state. We're thinking about surviving. We're thinking about uncertainty. We're thinking about our to-do list for the day, what we have going on for the rest of this week, and maybe even the weekend. We don't think about a year from now. But if you really start to think about, what are we celebrating as a couple? Like, what did we do? And just to give you a quick example, and then I want to kick this back to you. My wife and I did this when lockdowns started happening in 2020. So in May, I think we went through probably like 45 days of feeling sorry for ourselves. Why is this happening? Why can't our kids go to school? And we were asking all these horrible default drift questions. And one day we just looked at each other and we were just like, we're asking each other the wrong questions here. If we were to fast forward through the summer, and we're at the end of the summer and the school year has begun again, and maybe the kids are in school or maybe they're not, but we looked back on the summer and said, this was one of the best summers for our family. We connected in a way we never have. What did we do? And we asked the kids the same question. What did we do? If we were celebrating, despite the rest of the world and how everyone's disconnected, how did the Hagners connect? And our family came up with a plan. They're like, well, Dad, what if we went on an adventure every week? Well, what does that look like? Well, what if we go to a place we've never been? Great. What else? Well, what if we do things we've never done? Awesome. How often were we doing that? What if we did that once a week? Great. When do we do it? Well, what if you took off every single Wednesday, and Wednesday was our day for the next 12 weeks where we plan a trip and we go somewhere we've never been, do something we've never done that's quote unquote safe and within parameters of what's going on in the world. And we did that. And the summer of 2020 brought our family together like nobody's business. And my wife, for Father's Day this year, I never asked for gifts. That's not one of my love languages. But we have 190 photos of things that we did as a family that we've never done and how we came together. And I told her, I was like, for Father's Day, I only want one thing. I want you to take 50 to 60 of our best photos, and I want you to frame them up on a wall. And above, the statement has to be made, while the rest of the world panicked, we came together as a family. Summer 2020. Thank you, COVID. And that's what she did. And that's what we have. And it all came out of generative questions. But, talk to us about, like, since you love quality time, right? Maybe give the guys another example of maybe some questions that you've asked your wife.
I think one of the questions that I was thinking about that sort of generated a lot more conversation, and I think more from my wife even than I thought, was I asked her about, who inspires her and why does that person inspire you? And this is a question that I really thought, I had people in my head. I sort of knew what she would say, but I was just curious. And she ended up talking for like an hour, and I found out things about her childhood and relationship with her parents and other people that were important in her spiritual walk and things like this that I never knew before. Part of it too, I think, is not just asking the question, but then being able to listen and being able to, engage with that and ask, other follow-up questions and things like that, and sort of just help to, lead her or lead, your wife in a direction that just continues to, expand on those things. So that's one off the top of my head that I can think of. What I do is I sort of, instead of making time all the time every day to come up with things, if something hits me, I like to go for runs and things like that, spend some time, by myself and reflection, and stuff just sort of hits me at inopportune times. So I'll pull out my phone. I sort of have a list on there that I keep, and then I can sort of consult that, on a day when, we have some time. I like to try and do it every day, but, being fully transparent, that doesn't happen where we always get to ask each other one of those questions. But when we have the time, I'll pull that out and I'll go, hey, let's sit and have a conversation, and boom, I'm ready. I have that question ready to go. So
You gotta be
that's sort
prepared,
of
right?
Absolutely.
Hey, you gotta these things, since they're not our default questions, right? We have to be very intentional about them. Like, hey, what do I want to be really curious and appreciative about her today? Like, what do I want to ask her today that maybe I haven't asked her in a while, or if ever, right? And that takes a little bit of planning. It takes some effort, right? It's not one of those things that come naturally. That's why we call it interrupting the drift. Interrupting the drift, interrupting the drift, interrupting the drift, if I could only talk, is all about being planful, being intentional, and to be bold, right? And to do something that is outside the norm. Let me ask you this real quick. Have you ever, when you first started doing these things, did she look at you like, who are you? Why are you asking me such weird things?
I think my my wife is used to me talking a lot. So she's used to that. And I share a lot of stuff with her. I think what probably surprised her was the action of it, where I got intentional about it, and the consistency of, hey, I want to do this, and then actually doing it. I will talk to her a lot and say, hey, I'm learning about asking these questions and doing stuff like this, and do you want to do that? And, there's a difference between just talking about it and then actually putting it into action and doing it. So I think it was more the surprise of that than the actual act of asking the question.
Yeah, I want to give men some context here, because one of the things that I talk about in the 21 Days to an Extraordinary Marriage, and some of the guys that we coach in the Alliance, right? You started this particular podcast interview with expectation, right? Expectation. And you shared the story about your wedding night. And we as human beings, if things don't go how we expect them, we tend to get a little ruffled, right? But if we go into a situation where it's more, hey, I'm going to be curious about this, I'm going to be appreciative about this, not necessarily have like all the pressure of expectations. Maybe I would like to see something, but I'm not sold on it. It doesn't have to go out that way, right? So we have these expectations that, oh, well, I'm going to start asking my wife generative questions, like visionary questions. And she's going to respond with like, oh my gosh, all the stars have aligned and you are the most amazing man I've ever known in my life. Like, can you ask me something more? And now I love you so much and we should have sex immediately because now I feel connected to you, right? That's extreme. That's a joke. But at the same time, like we have these expectations that like, well, if I'm asking her deep questions, she's going to respond in a certain way. That's going to be really positive. And I always warn men, like, don't be surprised whatsoever if the first several times you do this, like the first week you do this, if you do it every day for a week, she's going to look at you like you have two heads. Who are you and what have you done with my husband? Expect that. Actually embrace that. Be okay with that, because that means you're growing, right? One of the worst things you can do is be like, well, I wanted to ask you a question. You know what? Forget it. Don't even worry about it. And then we just go right back to the status quo the next day because it didn't turn out the way we wanted it to. This, on the other hand, is when you get really curious and appreciative. It's like, hey, I'm going to allow this conversation to unfold. She might look at me like I have two heads. I'm okay with that. And I'll have an explanation behind that. I'd be like, look, I want to be more intentional about our relationship. And that means getting to know you on a deeper level. So that's what I want to do. And I guarantee if you follow up, if she looks at you like you have two heads, or she makes a comment, you follow it up with a comment like that, That's a very bold, masculine thing to do. And you're really standing in your power as her man. She'll probably respect the hell out of you for that one and then start to answer your questions. So I always want to give men a preempt, like if she looks at you like you're a little weird, that's okay because you're messing with her perception of you and people don't like that at the human level, right? As we wrap up here, Shane, I want to give you any type of freedom whatsoever to just share any advice that you want to give the audience. And I'm going to put you in a situation here. And here's a generative question, right? Let's go back to 5 years ago before you started having kids, like 2 years before having kids, or a year and a few months before having kids. And you were able to have dinner with yourself, like the Shane now, the Shane then. You're able to have dinner and you're at your favorite dinner spot. What is it?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Probably home. That's where I have dinner the most right now.
Okay. I want you to think about home. I want you to think about your favorite meal that you guys eat at home. I want you to think about your favorite beverage, whether that's a soda, whether that's a beer, or whatever you like. And you're literally looking at yourself and you're like, all right, buddy, I'm going to give you 2 pieces of advice for the next 5 years. Okay. And here's what they are. What would you say to yourself?
I love this type of question. I think one I've sort of already talked a lot about is, in my life, it's being able to embrace those unexpected things that come up and really leaning into my faith in those moments. And something I haven't talked about with that, I think, is being able to find the joy, find the gratitude in those situations. Because I feel like even in some really scary situations that I've been through, there's always gratitude that you can find. There's always something where you can land on to be thankful for, even within a bad day or a bad moment or whatever's going on. I believe that there's always something that, you can find in a moment like that to be thankful for. So I would definitely, that's one piece of advice I would give. And the other one that's really important to me, and I would, this has even had some to do with a quote that I heard on your podcast that you say a lot, is the definition of hell is lying on your deathbed and looking at the man that you could have become. I used to always be, growth is one of my core values. So I was always into quotes, sort of compiled things, but never really had anything that, meant enough for me to remember it like that. And that quote just hit me in a place that I didn't know I had, because it speaks to not having any regrets. And that's where I want to be. I would look at myself and I would say, don't let the fear of failure or the fear of making a mistake or, whatever it is, looking like a goofball, whatever you want to put there, stop you from doing something. Don't have any regrets when it comes to your marriage and trying to build that connection with your wife. Don't have any regrets with your kids. You're not going to look back and say, I wish I would have worked more hours. You're going to look back and say, I wish I would have spent more time with my kids when they were younger and had that playtime and done all that. And, other things that come up, chances that you could take that, it's easy to say, I'm not going to do that because I'm scared I'm going to fail. That's something that is very important to me. I wear I don't know if you could see it, but there's a bracelet on here, this one, that says no regrets. And it's a reminder to me every day that I want to make decisions that align with my core values and that I look back and don't have any regrets. Because the worst thing to me is not doing something and failing. It's not doing something at all, because then you'd have to look back and say to myself when I'm sitting there on my deathbed or laying there on my deathbed, and not know what, maybe I could have had a better relationship with somebody. Maybe I could have had a better marriage. Maybe, I could have started this business or whatever it was. So those are the 2 pieces of advice I would give myself.
Well said, my friend. Well said. No regrets. Don't be afraid of failure. And gentlemen, definition of hell, like we said many, many times, definition of hell is meeting the man that we could have become when we're on our deathbed. That's not what we want for any of our guys. That's the whole vision of Dad Edge Alliance, is that men go and live a legendary life and build an epic connection with people under their own roofs, or whatever you're from, right? Roofs. But honestly, that is the key to it. And gentlemen, listen, if you're living in the drift right now, that's okay, because the rest of the world is too. But if you're hungry to be like, yeah, this ain't working for me, and this is not where I want to be, and you want to be surrounded by other men in the in the alliance who want to help you with that, who want to support you with that, and also share the same vision you do and the same hunger, then my advice is get off the fence and jump into what we do. You can find everything that we're doing over at thedadedge.com/alliance. You'll find Shane in there. He's a part of our, like I said, our leadership team on Tuesday evenings. But Shane, this was so good, man. And I got to tell you, I want to honor you for a minute for being really authentic with a couple of stories that I did not think you were going to share. But, people don't relate to the surface level stuff. People relate to the stuff that people don't talk about very often, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. So that's where human beings, man, that's the glue that molds us together. And that's what deep connection is all about, man. I'm honored. I'm honored you're on the leadership team. I'm honored to fight this fight with you. And I'm honored to see you grow as a man and husband as well. It's just so cool, man.
Thank you, Larry. I really appreciate that. It just means a lot to be here.
Back at you, my friend. Gentlemen, you can find all the show notes. You can find an application for Dad Edge Alliance. Also, if you want to connect with somebody like Shane, we'll have his social media contact information in the show notes. Just head on over to thedadedge.com/Friday20. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday20. Shane, thank you so much, brother. Appreciate you.
It's been a pleasure, Larry. Appreciate it.
You bet. Gentlemen, go out, live legendary. Take care.